Previously on Beyond the Lens, which I'm looking at my schedule now. It looks like autocorrect changed it to phones and Ferb.
I noticed that and I wasn't going to say anything because it actually sounds pretty funny.
Yeah.
Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Lens. I'm PJ, joined by Rico once again.
Hello.
And unfortunately, Eric is still not here, but the show must go on for now. Today, we're reviewing a kids show that didn't come out until 2007, and it's one of the latest shows that we're doing so far. In fact, I'll let our listeners know right now that a lot of the shows and specials that we're doing this season are things that came out when we were preteens or teenagers, when we were high school. Actually, one of the franchises that we're doing later this season didn't even have its first installment until 2015. So that's your hint for that series. So stay tuned for that episode. With that being said, though, the show we're talking about today is a little cartoon called Phineas and Ferb, which was a cartoon that aired on Disney Channel from 2007 to 2015. It only had 4 seasons, but those seasons were spanned out across a couple years on average, with an average of about 30 to 40 episodes, which is why the show ran for so long. But it also had a couple of movies and specials that came along with it, and the last one being in 2020. So overall, I think 13 years of this show is pretty amazing, and also considering that it was classified as a kid's show. So that's a pretty long run for a kid's series. I was about 10 years old when this show came out. Rico, how familiar are you with Phineas and Ferb, considering that it didn't come out until, I believe you were a teenager, correct?
I think so. It came out in 2007, you said?
Yes.
So I actually think I would have been 12, turning 12 that year. So maybe not quite a teenager, but around that age.
Okay.
And so how familiar am I with it? It's when I watched Disney Channel and Nickelodeon at that age, I was usually more so interested in the live action shows like Hannah Montana and Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, things like that. But when it comes to Phineas and Ferb, it was like the one exception, like the one cartoon that I didn't mind watching.
Nice. Actually, speaking of Hannah Montana and Sweet Life, there were actually 2 actors from both shows that voiced characters on the show, with Ashley Tisdale voicing Phineas and Ferb's older sister, Candace, and Mitchell Musso from Hannah Montana voicing her love interest, Jeremy. So it was a really cool thing for a lot of the Disney Channel stars to get together and kind of be on this series. Phineas and Ferb was created by Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh, and there are multiple fun facts about these two. The first one being both of them had previously worked together on The Simpsons and another Nickelodeon show called Rocko's Modern Life. I didn't really watch that show, but I know that it was pretty popular. And Dan also worked on Family Guy, where he was given total creative freedom. So both these guys going into this were not only super talented, but they also had years of experience behind them and were very well respected among the other animators and creatives. Another fun fact is that Dan voiced Dr. Doofenshmirtz on the show, and I'll explain these characters later on, of course, and Jeff voiced Major Monogram. And this show was kind of created when Dan, I believe, drew a triangle-headed kid, and I guess that sparked the idea for the show overall. They also said that growing up before computers and iPhones and other technology, they wanted to capture the things that they probably would have done when they were kids but just blown extremely out of proportion for this show. So I guess they kind of saw themselves in Phineas and Ferb. Despite both Dan and Jeff being extremely experienced animators and creatives in the industry, it still took them around 16 years before they found a network that accepted their pitch for this show. And of all networks, it's crazy to me that it was Disney, especially since, as you may have figured it out already, even though this was centered around a pair of stepbrothers who every day during their summer vacation, they embarked on a brand new project, there are a couple of adult themes throughout this series and some subjects that aren't really talked about in kids shows either, which I'll also get to later on. But yes, this show is centered around two stepbrothers, Phineas and Ferb. Phineas's mom married Ferb's dad, who is British, and Candace is Phineas's biological older sister. So every day, every episode is Phineas and Ferb embarking on some random adventure or building something that they shouldn't be building, because no 8 to 10-year-old can do that sort of thing. Like, build a roller coaster in their backyard. You kind of need permits for that. And also, that's kind of physically impossible. So they just do a bunch of really outrageous things. And since they're so outrageous, Candace, who, as I mentioned, was voiced by Ashley Tisdale, one of Disney's greatest, she tries to bust them, aka get them in trouble for doing these things every episode. But every single time that she tries to do so, Phineas and Ferb's project either ends up getting destroyed or taken away, or some other thing that makes it disappear at the very last second, usually by the work of this side storyline, where it's Phineas and Ferb's pet, Perry the Platypus, who works for an organization called OWCA, or the acronym for the organization without a cool acronym, as Agent P, who is trying to stop Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz from asserting his evilness, usually either by destroying their city, the tri-state area, or destroying something or someone else. So these characters are the main ones in the show. Other characters include, as I mentioned, Candace's love interest, Jeremy, who is voiced by Mitchell Musso. Allison Stoner, another Disney great, plays Isabella, who secretly likes Phineas, but is his friend for most of the series. Phineas and Ferb's other friends include Buford and Baljeet. And there are way more characters throughout the series, but I believe those are the most important ones that come to my mind. I deeply apologize if I forgot any. Also, Phineas and Ferb don't know that Perry the Platypus, who is, by the way, also voiced by one of the most legendary actors of all time, D. Bradley Baker. He voices animals throughout a bunch of other series. They don't know that Perry the Platypus is a secret agent, so that's another running gag in the show. Now, in any show, I appreciate running gags because no matter how old I am, they're just always funny to me for some reason. And this show had a lot of them, including the jingles. We had different variations of Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, which was Doofenshmirtz's classic theme song. We also have the fact that Perry the Platypus is, for some reason, unrecognizable when he doesn't wear his hat. So when he visits Doofenshmirtz, sometimes he either won't be wearing his hat or will disguise himself as something else. And Doofenshmirtz doesn't recognize him at all and says something like, oh, it's just this or just that. Like, no big deal. But then Perry, of course, reveals himself by putting on his hat or getting out of whatever he was in. And that's when Doofenshmirtz says, Perry the Platypus. Like, that will never not be entertaining to me. And the other running gag I can think of is the classic, aren't you boys a little young to be doing this, whenever they get discovered upon if someone runs into them working on their project. And Phineas always responds, yes, we are. That was my catchphrase when I was a kid. If someone asked me a similar question or something that would lead up to that, I would always respond with, yes, I am. It's just so funny. And as I mentioned earlier, the show also had a lot of adult themes, jokes, or references, including references to Family Guy, SpongeBob, other pop culture references. They also break the fourth wall multiple times. Dan Povenmire himself describes the show as a combination of both Family Guy and SpongeBob, which is probably why I love this show so much and why it became so popular. And then Jeff Marsh said that the show wasn't created exclusively for kids and that he just simply said he didn't exclude them as an audience, which is one thing I noticed, because it's like they don't label it as a children's show. When you think of the word children, you think of, well, at least in my opinion. I think of kids who are under the age of 7 or 8 when I think of the word children. When I think of kids, I think, oh, okay, they're a little older, maybe around 10, 11, 12 years old. So when they labeled it as a kid show, I thought it made perfect sense there, or along the lines of a kid show, I should say. And another adult topic was the fact that Dr. Doofenshmirtz in the show, oh, here's some more characters, had an ex-wife and a daughter, Vanessa. Now, growing up, my parents were divorced too. In fact, I related to Vanessa a lot because her parents also being divorced, but still having that sort of relationship where they still were, I guess, frenemies or friends or whatever they wanted to label themselves. My parents were kind of the same way. And it's crazy how Vanessa also had brown hair and wears a lot of black. I actually had a jacket that was very similar to hers, coincidentally, and I would always wear it all the time. And in general, Vanessa had a really cool personality. She was really chill, but also serious at some points. So she was my favorite character by far. Rico, did you have a favorite character on the show?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many great characters. I'm not sure I can choose.
There were, I mean, for sure. Like every character had like their own unique personality, and that's why that's another reason why I really enjoyed the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if Vanessa didn't exist, I don't think I would have a favorite character either. I mean, maybe except Candace, because like she was supposed to be the annoying older sister. We all know that. But that's also what made the show really entertaining. So I really enjoyed seeing the characters kind of all interacting with each other, even though at some points, as I mentioned earlier, Phineas and Ferb didn't know that Perry was a secret agent. Doofenshmirtz didn't know that. I'm pretty sure that he never found out that Phineas and Ferb actually existed, but when other characters would cross paths and the way that they interacted was so funny. And yeah, they just brought their own personalities and it all blended together so well. And the other thing I really like about the show is, like SpongeBob and a couple of the other shows that we've talked about so far, is that this series is not really in chronological order. In fact, the theme song states that there are, quote, 104 days of summer vacation, which, by the way, Bowling for Soup, a band I really like, sang the opening theme song. But in reality, there are 129 episodes, and there's also 222 segments, and not including the movies or specials, I believe. So there are way more episodes than what the theme song states. So it can be assumed that there are multiple summer vacations like compiled together in the show, and each episode is a new day, a new adventure, just another day of Phineas and Ferb being Phineas and Ferb. And I don't have a favorite episode that comes to mind, but the episodes that explains Doofenshmirtz's past or when he was younger are really funny to me because of the way that he's portrayed, especially in the episode where he said that both of his parents didn't show up for his birth. That was hysterical. So Rico, do you have a favorite episode?
I mean, the one that comes to mind is actually a very early episode called Swinter. Did you see that one?
I feel like the title's familiar, but I don't remember that one.
It was aired very early on in season 1. It was the one where Phineas and Ferb use a snow cone machine to sort of mix summer and winter together.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
How do you like that one?
I think it's partly because I think it was the first episode of Phineas and Ferb I remember watching, at least. I think at the time I watched, I was home from school sick, and I was just watching going through the channels, and that was on, and so that's what that reminds me of. But another episode that comes to mind, I don't remember what Phineas and Ferb was doing in this episode, but I remember there was one point where Doofenshmirtz was trying to use tinfoil and a giant magnet to reverse the Earth's rotation, and I always thought that was cool for some reason.
Yes, I remember that one. That one's a classic. I think it was one of the most rerun episodes because I would see that one a lot. Because I do remember briefly the one with the snow cone machine, but that one, the one with the magnet, definitely rings a bell in my head for sure. And there was a bunch of other crazy episodes. We all know the classic. They built the roller coaster in their backyard. They also or was it Doofenshmirtz that did this? He was trying to go to like a secluded island or something, and he tried to take the island. I can't remember that one very vividly, but I just thought that one was really interesting. And I mean, they did all sorts of things. And I remember it being in general rerun on or I guess reran, I should say, on Disney Channel a lot, because every single time that I tuned into Disney Channel, no matter what time of the day it was, if it was after school, if it was in the morning, Phineas and Ferb seemed to always be on because it was that popular. In fact, I think around 10 million people tuned into the first episode ever, which is outstanding for a kid show. And I think that's why it became so successful. And I really enjoyed not just the show itself, but also all the music that was involved. And I kind of sang one of the jingles already, but there were several different jingles and songs throughout the show. There's Doofenshmirtz's theme song, the one that goes be doo be doo ba doo be doo be doo, which I think is Perry's theme song.
Yeah.
And then the other montage song, which goes shoob it up, shoobity bit ba. And now it's like a popular TikTok song. Like that's how much of an impact this show has made on people. And throughout the series, there were actually several songs that were written for the show. So much so, in fact, that describing this show, Wikipedia says that it's action, adventure, science fantasy, comedy, slapstick, and it's also a musical. Some of the songs that were sung in the show include one by Candace where she sings about squirrels in her pants, the classic Aglet song where they taught pretty much an entire generation what an aglet was, and the most catchiest song in the show, in my humble opinion, Gitchy Gitchy Goo. Overall, though, I think my favorite song is definitely the Squirrels in My Pants song, because not only is it catchy, but it was way ahead of its time, because the acronym for that song is SIMP, which if you don't know what that is, I encourage you to look it up on your own time. Let's just say it's another popular TikTok thing. It's just perfect. Rico, do you have a favorite song or jingle?
I mean, some of the ones that you mentioned, I remember. I think another one that stood out to me, I think it was all something like Ain't Got Rhythm or something.
Yep, I Ain't Got Rhythm.
Yeah, that one stands out to me.
That one, I almost mentioned that one too, because that one was also really catchy. And the funny thing about that one was that I think before the song started, it referenced another pop culture thing, or more of an adult reference of how like some of these bands that kind of disband and go on with their separate lives, like that's where the members end up. Sometimes they're working, I think he worked at a bookstore or something in this episode, and that's what he was doing. He was saying, well, I don't got rhythm anymore because like I'm old and I'm not the young person I was when I was in a band. But as we know, I think later on in that episode, he does get the band back together, and just proves that you don't have to be stuck doing something you don't want to do for the rest of your life. But I think that was a really cool thing to reference that in a kid's show. And as for the movies, I did briefly see, I don't remember what it was called. I have to go to the Wikipedia real quick. I believe it was something about, Across the Second Dimension. I did briefly see that movie. I think I saw it once, and I know that the film talks about Phineas and Ferb accidentally helping Dr. Doofenshmirtz with an invention that takes them to a parallel dimension. Perry also reveals his double life as a secret agent to them there, which I now remember. And he tries to save everybody from this alternative Dr. Doofenshmirtz as they team up with their alternate dimension selves to stop him. Now, I don't know if this was the movie that had this in it, but there was a movie where they were traveling across the world, and one of the stops that they made was in Japan. And when they were in Japan, another song was sung called Welcome to Tokyo, I think. And it was them doing this dance where they put their hands on their heads and kind of move their hips side to side. And a lot of people kind of pointed this out. It's actually not a Japanese origin. It originated from a Swedish pop song called Caramel Dancin'. So I'm not sure who researched that part for the movie, but they actually got that fact wrong or put it in the wrong country. Or maybe they did it on purpose, but a lot of people made that observation. I thought it was funny because weirdly and strangely enough, I actually like Swedish pop music and the band Caramel Dancin', and because that's not their only song they have, that's just their most popular one. And I thought, that's kind of interesting to see this in a kid's movie and kind of reference that pop culture thing. But that was honestly the only thing I remember from that movie, other than it was chaotic and they went, and I didn't really enjoy the movie as much as I did the show. But I haven't seen the other two movies, so I'm not really sure what they're all about. I think the other two movies, I don't know the title of the second one, but there was another movie that recently came out in 2020 called Candace Against the Universe. It did not premiere on Disney Channel. It was actually on Disney Plus, and within a year of its launch, in April 2019, it was announced, and then it released on Disney Plus and on August 28th, 2020. Most of the series cast reprised their roles except Thomas Sangster, who played Ferb. He was replaced with David Arrigo Jr., who had previously voiced Ferb on another side project called Milo Murphy's Law. And the film is actually unrelated to the theatrical Phineas and Ferb film in development, which I think they're talking about a potential third film that was discussed shortly before the movie was released. Now, since I haven't really seen the movies, I'm wondering if you have, Rico, and if you have, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the movies. I do remember seeing previews for Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension, and I also know, like you said, there was a more recent movie that came out on Disney Plus. Just haven't had time to watch them yet.
Same. And especially since the movie came out 2 years ago, we're in our 20s now. And I mean, granted, I do have a Disney Plus account. I just didn't know that it existed. I didn't know if there were any promotional things for it or the way they marketed it, but I did not know it existed until I actually read the Wikipedia article. So I definitely will check that out after this episode is over. But I thought it ended production, Phineas and Ferb in general, around 2015. So to hear that there was a third movie that came out very recently, and the fact that they could potentially be working on another movie is pretty cool. That will mark around 15 years of Phineas and Ferb content, which I think for any show in general is extremely well performing. I mean, I think it's really great that this show has had such an impact across so many generations, including Gen Z. Speaking of which, I actually know that after Candace Against the Universe premiered, they talked about the third film, and then there was also a very short spin-off series. And actually, I'm sorry, this was before the movie premiered. I think it came out in 2010 or 2011. I think it ran from 2010 to 2011. It was a very short spin-off series called Take Two with Phineas and Ferb. And I do remember this one. Yes. And it was a live action talk show that I think would play in between shows on Disney Channel.
Yeah.
And this is where Phineas and Ferb, as cartoons, would interview celebrity guests, including Tony Hawk, Randy Jackson, Neil Patrick Harris, Seth Rogen, Taylor Swift, a bunch of other celebrities. And it did only last about a year, but I do remember it, and it was very entertaining and very cool to see that hybrid of cartoons and real life people. So of course that was going to keep me entertained. There was also another YouTube series that I have not seen that was starring Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and it ran also for about a year. And I think it was called Doofenshmirtz Daily Dirt or something. And it was a YouTube series that was kind of centered around Doofenshmirtz talking about current events, more pop culture references, the internet, etc. Something that was definitely targeted towards Gen Z, especially since it was a YouTube series. Again, I haven't seen it. I don't know if you have, Rico.
I haven't, but that reminds me. I remember this was a few years ago. I don't know why I did it, but there was an episode of Shark Tank. I think this was just a snippet at the end, and they said to watch the full thing online, where it was Dr. Doofenshmirtz pitching in something to the sharks. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that he was apparently seeking $1 million for 1%.
That's so fun. How did I not know? I watched Shark Tank too, so I'm surprised I haven't heard of that. That's so funny. Yeah, that sounds like something Dr. Doofenshmirtz would say for sure. I want $1 million for only 1%. God. And now I have to look that up because that's too funny. But I mean, overall, it seems like the show had a really great blend, unlike anything else. We had the fact that it wasn't strictly targeted towards kids. It involved a blended family, which you didn't really see on TV that often and still really don't. And it just had a bunch of other things like the music and running gags in the show that, despite how crazy and complex it got, it somehow worked extremely well together. And that's why I think this show worked out. And I can see why at first Dan and Jeff had problems pitching the show, because it was very chaotic. And I'm sure pitching it to a network executive being, oh yeah, it's about these two kids that like do all this stuff and here's this and here's that, it'd be super overwhelming. But I'm so glad Disney saw the potential in the show and they went, oh yeah, this could work for sure. And it did. It's just amazing.
I think I read somewhere that they pitched to several networks, including Disney Channel, like as early as I think 2000 or so. Disney said they would pass on it for now, but they would hold on to it. And I think it was Dan Povenmire who said that they just assumed that was code for we're just going to throw it away. So it was surprised when they called back years later saying they were interested in developing the show again. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that it definitely took them a long time to pitch the show and make sure that it got off the ground. But I think I heard something similar to that, because the fact that they spent so long trying to pitch the show to people and then only to have it years later, like after a while you get burnt out of pitching it to people and you'd be like, okay, well, maybe we should abandon it after all. And then years later, Disney calls back and says, oh, actually, we want it right now. I think that would make the most sense to me. And other things throughout the show, other than the running gags that I've already mentioned, some other ones include Perry slipping away to one of many hidden tunnels, which why does the city have so many, to a secret underground base. When Phineas occasionally remarks, hey, where's Perry? And then we also have Major Monogram, which again is voiced by Jeff himself, where he briefs Agent P on his mission. And then he adds something like, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is up to something, find out what it is and put a stop to it. Like, I think this show had a great amount of expectations, especially for me as an autistic person. When you know when something is going to happen, it keeps you engaged. And it's like, oh, okay, this is going to happen now. This is going to happen now. Yes, I love this part of the show. Again, you didn't really see that very often in earlier kid shows. And again, you still really don't. So I really appreciated that running gag theme throughout the show. There's this whole list here of running gags that I could spend forever on. And it's just crazy to me. And there were, I think in total, there were different, I don't know what the differences between segments and episodes are, but there were several. I think it's just like cut scenes or something between the shows or whatnot.
I think it's because in animation, they have 1.5 hour episode that's divided up into 2 segments. So like the sort of like the 15-minute stories that are back to back, those are considered segments.
Oh, that's right. Because SpongeBob was the same way, and that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I totally forgot about that. For some reason, my brain was thinking, oh, it's one giant half-an-hour episode. No, it was probably split into 15-minute episodes. So that makes sense to me now.
I mean, I think there were a few that were like special half-hour long episodes, and like this one thing which sort of goes back to what you said about the familiarity of the show. There was one episode where it seemed that Candace had like finally really busted her brothers. Did you see that one?
Yes, I didn't see the episode, but I did see the clip of it. It was on YouTube or something, but I did see that.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing that episode. And so they get sent to like some sort of military reform camp school thing. And in the end, it turns out that that bit's actually like a dream within a dream. So it starts out with Candace waking up, realizing it was a dream. And then in that dream, she discovers Perry's secret double life. And so that morning, she's talking to her family and mentions that, and then all of a sudden secret agents come bursting down the door and start like taking over the family and saying, Perry, we need to find a replacement now that your cover is blown. And then that's when Perry wakes up. So it was a weird dream within a dream sort of thing. So that technically never really happened, but I still found it sort of interesting.
Yeah, I was wondering where that came from, because like I said, I didn't see the entire you said it was like a special?
Yeah, I think it was one that lasted at least a half hour, like the full half hour.
Yeah, so I never saw the full thing. I just saw the clip of Phineas and Ferb finally being busted by Candace. But I'm like, well, how did that happen? Because like there's the rest of the show where they still haven't been busted. That would make sense that it was a dream now, because I was wondering how that came about. And I think the same thing happened in Across the Second Dimension, because I think Perry or Doofenshmirtz, I can't really remember. I could be totally wrong. I really don't know. But I think their memories were erased or something. And that's why they also don't remember Perry being a secret agent, or maybe they got tricked into thinking that it was Perry from the other dimension. So that could be a possible explanation as well. And I'm actually, now that you mention the hour-long special, there was another one called the OWCA Files, and it was an hour-long special on Disney XD, which, in case for those of you that aren't familiar with Disney XD, is like a spin-off sub-channel to Disney Channel. And while the episode was set to air during the regular season, it was later announced that the show would end with the last day of summer, and that episode would air as a standalone special on the Disney XD network. On Disney Plus, it's split into 2 parts, but the episode focuses on OWCA, Agent P, and Dr. Doofenshmirtz with the other new agents. And I have not seen that, but it sounds very interesting as well. And I think it is still on, it's on Disney Plus, obviously. I'm going to give that a watch as well. And then the one I mentioned earlier was Milo Murphy's Law crossover. And I guess it's some sort of crossover episode with, I think it's, I don't know exactly what it is, but I guess it's another hour-long special that I think is also possibly on Disney Plus. And I guess another thing that I forgot is there was another thing with Chibi Tiny Tales, and it's a series of shorts that depict the characters in a chibi-style animation. If you don't know what that is, it's like a Japanese anime style where they're kind of short-bodied, big-headed, and these shorts are a loose follow-up of other tiny or chibi tiny tales made for another series, the Big Hero 6, the series. And the shorts were made in conjunction with the release of Candace Across the Universe. So it makes sense as to why I haven't heard of this one either. And the first 3 shorts were originally aired on Disney Channel in 2020 as part of the Phineas and Ferb marathon leading up to the movie. But other than that, I'm not sure where you can watch those ones. But I think that's also interesting that they explored other animation styles with the characters, like they did with the live action and cartoon crossover. So there's just a lot of like spin-off things to this series. And I don't think there's any other series that have this many like side projects to them, other than SpongeBob maybe. But I mean, Phineas and Ferb became so successful that there's just this many, I guess, spin-offs or prequels or whatever projects they had going on for them. There's just too many. I can't even count them at this point. But overall, it was just a very enjoyable kids show. And I think, if I remember correctly, the very final episode of Phineas and Ferb, Isabella and Phineas do finally get together. They get married, I think. They have kids later on in the future. And I'm so glad that they had a proper closure to this series, because I always hope for that sort of thing with any show. Because unfortunately, there are some kids shows where it's gotten canceled without any notice. They don't have time to make a proper closure or whatever. I am so glad that the show was so successful that they were able to properly give the characters a nice ending.
Yeah.
But I think that is all the things I had to say about this show, other than the reason why I really liked this show again was because it was so diverse and it had so many references to adult themes than other kids shows did, and I guess more relatable content, like again the fact that they portrayed a divorced couple and then a couple who remarried. So that was really refreshing to see, like all these blended and different families. And I just really appreciated the show for that reason. And of course, it was just entertaining altogether, chaotic, but very entertaining. Rico, do you have any other last minute things to add?
I think one thing, I mean, this isn't technically official, but I'm wondering, have you seen this one fan animation of Phineas and Ferb on YouTube? It's basically someone discovered that if you take like a regular Green Day song and speed it up by so much that it actually sounds like it's Phineas singing. And
really?
So someone made a fan animation of "Wake Me Up When September Ends" and drew like all the Phineas and Ferb characters in like emo clothing and attire and stuff like that.
Oh, of course. Of course someone did that. That
Yeah.
reminds me of nowadays, Dan Povenmire is actually pretty popular on TikTok. And in
Yeah.
fact, I literally learned a few weeks ago that he was the voice of Doofenshmirtz this entire time because of his TikTok account. And I'm like, why did I not make this connection earlier? And it's very entertaining that he has this sort of side thing. Cause I think Butch Hartman, who created the Fairly Odd Parents, same thing. He had a YouTube channel that was super popular. Now he's on TikTok too, and he talks about behind the scenes content of the Fairly Odd Parents and kind of what happened behind the scenes. And Dan Povenmire does a very similar thing with that. But there's a lot of TikTok content from him, but there's also another TikTok account called There I Ruined It. And this guy does a bunch of songs where he edits different vocals from different songs and puts them on another song, or he mashes up different songs together or speeds them up. And there's another TikTok account where he just says, oh, well, I ruined this song because it sounds like this character. And I feel like I'm shocked that no one's done that for the Green Day Phineas and Ferb thing yet, because that seems like it would be on one of those TikTok accounts. But point being, there's definitely still talk about Phineas and Ferb, and the fact that the show is still, well, the show itself is over, but the side projects are still going on, and that Dan is very active on TikTok, still talking to people about how Phineas and Ferb made an impact on them and behind the scenes content of the show that people love learning about and seeing. So that's been really refreshing to see also.
I also didn't know until recently, probably not as recently as a few percent, because I came across his TikToks as YouTube Shorts a few months ago. But I also didn't know that Dan Povenmire was the voice of Dr. Doofenshmirtz. So, but one of the behind the scenes videos that I remember seeing was where he revealed that there was like some sort of animation error where like Dr. Doofenshmirtz's mouth was open the entire time, and they were supposed to fix it. But in the meantime, when he went to record that scene, he just decided to sort of stretch out that last word, the tri-state area. And it was so funny that it ended up staying in the final episode.
Yeah, I'm surprised that doesn't ring a bell to me, but I feel like I've heard of it, but or maybe I just forgot, since it's been so many years since I've actually seen Phineas and Ferb. I just remember that it had that big impact on me, and that the fact that I quoted like every other thing that Phineas said when I was younger. So it was just overall one of my favorite shows and cartoons in general. Also, am I saying his last name wrong? Have I been mispronouncing it this whole time? Is it Povenmire?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay, so if I said it or mispronounced it wrong, I apologize. This is why I don't say people's names and I just reference first names. But I want to thank Dan and Jeff for persisting on this show and not canceling it or giving up on it, because it made my entire life. It was one of the shows that shaped me to who I am today. And, you know, this is the exact definition of persisting. If you have a dream and you want to get it out there, you keep going for it, because if you know that it's good and you believe in your heart that it's great, then I think that it is great and it will make a difference for so many people. And truly, surely, clearly it has. So I just have so many like great memories from this show, and I cannot thank both of them enough. All right, so I believe that is it for this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in once again, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's WERQ by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Recore Entertainment production.